Hello, welcome to another episode of Forgotten Cemeteries, Pacific Northwest. Today we're at Viola Pioneer Cemetery, located in Viola, Oregon, Clackamas County. And it's been a while since I've been down here. Alternative names of the cemetery, none that I know of. So let's go meet some local residents and hear their story. A little background on this cemetery. Is established in 1850 with quite a bit of burials per the Oregon Burial Site Guide, but Find a Grave only shows about 120 memorials from my understanding. For my readings, this is one of the more tucked away cemeteries, not so visited these days, but for the most part it's well taken care of. The community of Viola is classified as a hamlet, small village in other words. Lacking information, but I did find they are praised for one of their one-room schoolhouses built in 1894. The town used to be named Clear Creek, but was later renamed in 1876 to Viola after Violet Harding, which is sadly not buried at the cemetery. I guess she didn't like the countryside. Back in the day, Viola was a stagecoach stop for individuals traveling to Oregon City for the most part. From there, typical story, big timber business, but then died out, leaving not much here. I guess a handful of businesses used to be here a decade ago, but I couldn't find much on them, just a local cidery these days using Google Maps. So you can visit the cemetery, and after that, get sloshed on hard cider, I guess. Today we'll hear some sad endings to a few individuals here, why boat engineers exist, meet a Prussian army vet, stop by a Civil War Vets Memorial, perhaps meet an individual who helped his father with the Underground Railroad in Iowa back then, and finally, if you opened up your Christmas gift and found a few grains of salt, how would you react? Thankful or insulted? Get it? Insulted? Never mind. And I thought I'd start off with the individual with the oldest birth year that I know of in the cemetery, and that's of James Brown, born in 1796. An 1852 immigrant to Oregon, and as we've seen, one of the more popular years for the Oregon Trail. Not only Oregon, California was estimated to receive around 50,000 immigrants that year. And leaning on its side is the memorial of the Stormer family. We're more interested in Isaac Stormer, though. He was born in Tennessee, and from my readings, they were all pioneers of 1852 to Oregon. Isaac was a member of the Masonic. Not sure if the famous symbol is on the headstone. I didn't see it. But he was a well-respected dude in the community back then. Isaac lived until the age of 89. He should have lived a few more years, however, reading up on his sad ending. One day he left to go fishing along the Clackamas River and never returned home. Apparently 40 people searched for him through the woods and the river. Isaac was sadly finally found at the bottom of a steep cliff just a few feet from the water's edge. 80-foot drop to be exact, that broke his neck. And it was suspected he was making his way home late in the evening and just lost his footing on the trail. Now there's a giant hawk in the tree screeching, so hopefully he'll leave us alone. But the largest memorial in the cemetery belongs to the Newkirk family. More specifically, we're looking at Elridge Newkirk. Couldn't find much on him, but I did find that his father, Shipman Newkirk, cool name, bought a local general store in 1856 in Iowa. However, he would transform it into a stagecoach, as well as something secretive. He worked with a buddy of his and built these secret rooms underneath the building. Turns out he was aiding with the Underground Railroad and sheltered runaway slaves. It is said that he once housed the famous John Brown. That picture in the video always cracks me up, but reading up on them, John Brown was not scared of anything. He was very determined to end slavery. You should read his story. It's very interesting. Couldn't pin down when Eldridge came here to Oregon, but just perhaps he may have helped his father with the Underground Railroad back then. And up ahead is John A. Randolph. Cloudy on his birth year. Find a Grave says 1853. Another one says 1849, but as you can see, a Civil War vet serving in the 40th Wisconsin Infantry. Whether he was truly 11 or 15 when he joined the Army, I'm not sure. What I do know is he was part of the 100 Days Men crew. Basically a war effort in 1864 to put an end to the war within 100 days. And I think I have the correct headstone. It's hard to make out, but that would be Peter Lewis ahead. Born in New York, but moved to Ohio, then Indiana throughout his life. He is an 1847 arrival. Kind of odd because one write-up mentions Peter never married and came to Oregon with his sister, who was part of the Mattoon family, which there's a ton of them here. But if you check Find a Grave, they list his son as John Lewis, who's a few feet away from me. Even says it on his headstone, son. But Peter was born in 1827. His alleged son was born in 1820, so something must be off with the Find a Grave entry, perhaps. But Peter here served in the Cayuse Indian War, the first major conflict between Oregon Native Americans and pioneers. And a fun find was Matthias Karl Kirchheim, who was born in 1818 in Cologne, Prussia, the German kingdom back then. He would be drafted in the Prussian army, though he did serve his term. However, as soon as he finished, he got out of there immediately and left his family. He moved to the USA in 1843 and landed in Minnesota, which was apparently a hotspot for German immigrants back then. And as we found at our last cemetery, Germans tended to be expert craftsmen. Matthias' specialization was being a locksmith, and he would meet his wife there, who was buried at this same cemetery. Looks like his family tried California in 1855 instead of Oregon, settling near San Francisco. Must have not cared for it because they only lasted a year in California. Can't imagine why. But as they sailed up the west coast, they decided to land in Logan, Oregon. Couldn't find a reason, but his wife Elizabeth died pretty young at the age of 40 in 1866. However, in 1867, he bought a grist mill, and time went on. But you're seeing the weeping willow tree on his headstone, hopefully, typically marking a symbol of sad or unexpected death in my experience of readings. Matthias was riding home one day, and some yappy dog barked, scaring his horse, and trust me, there's a lot of yappy dogs by this cemetery. He would be bucked off and hit his head on a rock pretty hard. Apparently he didn't go to the doctor, and he was sick, and this went on for days, but he just didn't go to the doctor. One day he got up and just dropped dead at the age of 56, sadly. And our final stop is the headstone of Anne Chambers Stone, who has a very interesting story and kind of points out the struggles back then. She was born in England in this pretty scenery. However, Anne had some challenges finding a long-term husband, not a whole lot of luck. Not sure when she came to America, but it looks like she ended up in Toledo, Ohio early on. She married David McCohey in 1841, but sadly he died 2 years later. 2 years later, she married Joseph Warren Brown, who is buried at this cemetery. And I found a little cool write-up from her son, Myron Brown, who's buried here. He described as his father, Joseph, sold their farm and home in the fall of 1851. I'm assuming this is back in Ohio. And in 1852, they traveled to St. Joseph, Missouri with 2 wagons, which actually looks kind of pretty these days. You can buy this historical apartment building for like $90,000. Needs just a little bit of work. Anyway, they formed up the wagon train of 41, and a side note mentioned that they should have used the oxen instead of the horses due to the Indians. Guessing horse theft was a concern during those days, but Indians were kind of the least of their concerns. I heard that the water was very scarce along this trip, and the oxen ended up dying because they were drinking like alkaline water apparently. And I guess the trip was a bit miserable, as several cattle were found along the trail dead and just sitting in the sun, sort of fermenting. So imagine the smell. Then Anne's second husband, Joseph, got typhoid fever. They would, however, arrive at Snake River, but had to ditch one of the wagons due to the oxen dying off. So I'm guessing they had no team to pull it. Strange side note mentions that one of the individuals driving apparently made a makeshift boat of the broken down wagon. He just I don't know, nailed it together and said, there you go. The article referred to it as an improvised boat, and their plan was to float down the Snake River. And we've talked in the past about this river's reputation. A lot of people lost their lives on this river. I guess they made it a few hours, but the boat flipped and everyone died except that one driver, miraculously. Apparently he was found just wandering around in the wild by a random rider who just came by and saved him. The Brown family would arrive in pretty bad shape, and I read that the cows had to be substituted in for oxen at one point. They just kept dying off left and right to pull the wagons. Sadly, 3 days after arriving into Portland, Anne's husband, Joseph, succumbed to the typhoid fever. Anne would be faced with raising 2 children on her own in the Oregon Territory, and this is where the real test began for the family, if you can believe it. For the entire winter of 1852, I guess the ships were supposed to arrive in November with supplies for the pioneers. That ship never came, so supplies ran out for the most part. Potatoes and venison was the choice of food to get them by, but apparently they didn't even have salt for flavor. They had literally nothing, just trying to get by. To give you an idea how bad it was, there was a pioneer little girl opening up her stocking at Christmas. It had like a few grains of salt in it from Santa Claus. I guess he was feeling very generous that year. Apparently the little girl was so ecstatic. Imagine giving a little brat today salt instead of their PS5. back then, Anne would remarry, and she would marry an ace of stone. So third time's a charm, and they would donate the land for the cemetery, actually. Alrighty, time for the tour. There is a little gate, and it's unlocked if you want to like pull into the cemetery here. I came in a different road. I guess that's the road you come in. It wasn't quite clear. Pretty drive to get here for the most part. Not a whole lot going on. Dogs were really loud. Sounds like they quieted down. I thought I read that last name. What is it? Van Goosenbeek. Whoa. I think her husband was like a stagecoach wagon factory owner or something like that. It looks like she has a fancy headstone. The Mattoon family, I couldn't find much on them, but there's quite a bit of them, and I think 1852, something like that. Is when they have arrived. There's the Newkirk family, which perhaps helped with the Underground Railroad in Iowa. That was the first. That was kind of neat. I do agree that this cemetery is just kind of randomly tucked away on a road. There's Asa Stone and his wife, who donated the land for the cemetery. And there's Matthias with the Weeping Willow, who had a pretty sad ending, unfortunately. But I think that was our first Prussian army vet, I want to say, and our one Civil War vet, who apparently may have been 11 when he joined, which may be hard to believe, but it wasn't unheard of for people just to lie about their age. But 11's kind of hard to pass by as older, right? Who's this hidden here? I didn't see him. Hayden Company L, 2nd Missouri. Oh, okay. Apparently there's another Civil War vet here. Not a very big cemetery, as you've seen. There's like a whole row of unknowns. I believe there's quite a bit of unknowns here. Let's see what we got in here. Park bench with the train. And I guess that's the Pope. I can kind of see it. An old growth tree. Wow, how old that tree is. How old it is. Blasting this headstone out of the way. But as you can hear, chickens, hawks, a lot of dogs. You'll hear them if you pull in. Took them a while to calm down. Anywho, hope you enjoyed this little mini tour. If you have any other recommendations for cemeteries to visit in Oregon, either in Southern Washington, feel free to pipe up in the comments. Hope you're doing all right. Stay safe out there, and thanks for watching.